Before we start our topic today, please smash the like button and subscribe to help the channel grow. And thanks for your support. Who is Volodymyr Zelenskyy? Before Zelenskyy made a name for himself in politics, the Russian-speaking entertainer found fame with his comedy troupe, Kvartal 95. He starred in Servant of the People, a popular sitcom about a history teacher who gets elected president after a viral video depicts his rant about corruption. Life imitated art, with Zelenskyy becoming Ukraine's real-life president in 2019. During his presidential bid, Zelenskyy positioned himself as a political outsider, eager and willing to shake up the establishment. His platform was primarily focused on two goals: breaking up unscrupulous oligarchs' economic power and ending the war in the East. Though the specifics of his plans were unclear, the former comedian handily defeated President Petro Poroshenko, who made his fortune in the candy business as Ukraine's so-called chocolate king. Ukraine's president finds himself the #1 target of the Russian army as Moscow reportedly seeks regime change. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy came to power in 2019, taking charge of the war-torn, corruption-plagued country of about 45 million without any prior political experience. The political novice and former sitcom actor and comedian, who was dismissed by critics as a puppet of Ukrainian oligarch Ihor Kolomoisky, won his presidency by securing more than 73% of ballots, promising to balance the defense of Ukraine from Russian aggression with protecting the Russian speakers of his country. Born in the predominantly Russian-speaking industrial city of Kryvyi Rih in central Ukraine, the father of two was seen as best placed to succeed in his mission and shortly after becoming president, used diplomacy to get Moscow to exchange several groups of Ukrainian prisoners of war. But the goodwill of Russia's President Vladimir Putin was not to last, as Zelenskyy did not change his country's pro-Western foreign policy in favor of closer ties to its former master, Moscow. Last year, Russia started amassing its troops near Ukraine's borders with a pretext of holding military exercises. Despite warnings by the United States of the Russian plan to invade Ukraine, Zelenskyy tried to keep calm in the country, calling on Ukrainians to avoid panic. However, he shuttled around the capitals of Europe, trying to secure diplomatic, military and financial support for Ukraine to deter Moscow from invading. On Thursday, February 24, Zelenskyy became Europe's most vulnerable president, as Russia launched an all-out invasion of Ukraine by land, air and sea. A regime change. Fabrice Pothier, a chief strategy officer at the political consultancy Rasmussen Global and former director of policy planning at NATO, told Al Jazeera from Santander, Spain that Putin's aim was political capitulation, a regime change in Ukraine. It is pretty clear that he wants a regime change, and the regime should be, in his view, sympathetic to Russia's interest, turning down the NATO and the EU membership path, claiming some kind of neutrality or a Finland position, he said, referring to Finland's historic decision to associate with Europe but avoid hostility towards Russia by not joining NATO. Zelenskyy also identified himself as target #1 of Russia, but he and his family remained in Ukraine. They want to destroy Ukraine politically by taking down the head of state, the president said. The 44-year-old also criticized Ukraine's allies for not coming to his country's defense physically, limiting themselves with verbal, financial and diplomatic support. "We had been left alone to defend our state," he said in a video address to the nation after midnight. "Who is ready to fight alongside us? I don't see anyone. Who is ready to give Ukraine a guarantee of NATO membership? Everyone is afraid." Social media users have recognized his vulnerability by dubbing him a lonely but honorable man. How do the Ukrainians feel about him? Despite his landslide victory and a year and a half of relative popularity, the faith of the Ukrainian people in their president largely disappeared after Russia's first troop buildup began last spring. Recent polls indicate that twice as many Ukrainians don't trust him as those who do. Some point fingers at Zelenskyy's inner circle, many of them with more experience in the comedy industry than in government. Since the beginning of the current tensions last year, Zelenskyy lost the public's trust. Maria Zalkina, a political analyst with the Democratic Initiatives Foundation, a Kiev-based think tank, told The Times. In the weeks leading up to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Zelenskyy urged Ukrainians to remain calm and demanded proof of an impending Russian attack, as the US and NATO insisted a crisis could explode at any time. Now, Russia has moved forward with its assault on Ukraine, with airstrikes targeting the country's defenses, explosions echoing across cities and troops crossing the border by land and sea. On Thursday, a presidential advisor said Russian forces succeeded in taking control of the Chernobyl nuclear plant, the site of the world's worst nuclear accident in April 1986. Our defenders are giving their lives so that the tragedy of 1986 will not be repeated, Zelenskyy said on Twitter. This is a declaration of war against the whole of Europe. What's next? As Zelenskyy deals with attacks on his home soil, President Biden on Thursday said he was imposing severe sanctions on Russia for its premeditated attack on Ukraine. The sanctions are meant to limit the ability of Russia to do business in dollars, euros, pounds, and yen, Biden said. We are going to stunt the ability of Moscow to finance and grow the Russian military. The US also will deploy approximately 7,000 additional service members to Europe. The move is meant to reassure NATO allies and discourage further aggression from Russia. Meanwhile, the United Nations announced it is freeing $20 million for humanitarian needs in Ukraine. And lastly, I urge you watching. Please join me in prayer for Ukraine. Pray for the president and leaders of Ukraine to have wisdom in the coming days. Pray for wisdom, strength, and courage for the soldiers who are protecting Ukraine. Pray for civilians who have been displaced and for families who have been separated from each other as they have sought safety. Pray for those still seeking shelter, that God would give them clarity and wisdom in making hasty decisions. Pray for Ukrainians to seek and find the peace and hope of the gospel of Jesus Christ during this time. Pray for Ukrainian believers to find comfort, peace, and strength in God and share the source of their strength with others. Pray for God to enable the churches and missionaries of Ukraine to care for their people. Ask God to redeem this situation by drawing many people to Himself. May Ukrainians and Russians discover that Jesus is the only true source of peace, safety, comfort, truth, and freedom. Pray that Ukrainians ultimately would hope not in governments, elections, or diplomacy, but in Jesus Christ. Ask God to deliver Ukraine from evil. May He have mercy and heal this land. May He give Ukraine peace and the chance to develop as a nation that values truth, justice, and freedom, all rooted in the goodness of God. Pray for a culture in which political disagreements don't lead to hatred or violence. The conflict between Ukraine and Russia can spill over into personal conflict within families, especially when family members live on opposite sides of the border and are influenced by different sides of the information war. Pray for unity and a love for one another that supersedes the problems between the countries. Ask God to bless soldiers' wives and children with peace and safety while their husbands and fathers are gone. Pray for the various world leaders involved in diplomacy over Ukraine. Pray that the evangelical church will remain united, even as it faces difficult questions, such as how involved believers ought to be in politics or in armed conflict. In the past few years, the Ukrainian evangelical church has become much more passionate about sending its own cross-cultural workers to reach the lost. Pray that this conflict will not dissuade Ukrainians from taking the gospel message to Russia and to other lands. Pray for Christians in the military. This is a challenging time. Ask God to guide them as their faith is being tested in new ways. Fears stemming from the conflict come up frequently in conversation. Pray that missionaries and other believers will have many opportunities to explain to their neighbors and friends the reason for the hope within them, even in this time of trial. When hearing tragic news like the current conflict in Ukraine, it is easy to despair. However, as Christians, we can trust in the sovereignty and goodness of our God. Thank you for watching. See you again for another interesting facts and amazing stories, and also please like and subscribe.